Single dad and little boy saved by janitor's son in the most unbelievable way. Rain slams the ER doors. A single dad runs in with his little boy, limp in his arms, eyes half closed, lips pale. A nurse shouts for a bed. The dad's hands shake. He has no money, no insurance card that works, and the monitor is already screaming. A billionaire CEO is in the lobby for a donation photo. Cameras flash, then stop, confused. Everyone watches. No one moves fast enough. The janitor's son steps from the shadows, drops his mop, and says one sentence that changes the room. He reaches for the boy, and the machines calm for a second, as if listening. The dad stares. The CEO frowns. The staff hesitates. A choice hangs in the air, heavy as the storm outside. Everyone holds their breath as the janitor's son does the one thing no one expects. Then the lights flicker. Before we dive into the story, make sure to hit subscribe button and like the video, and tell us in the comments where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The night belongs to Cleveland rain. Michael keeps his head down as he hustles from a bus stop to the small apartment he rents above a laundromat. His jacket is thin. His son, Ethan, waits by the window with a blanket on his shoulders and a toy truck in his hand. They keep the heat low to save dollars, and they count every receipt like it's a secret map. Michael used to install floors. After his wife died, he took whatever shifts he could. Dishwasher, delivery, warehouse temp, anything that let him make it home in time to help Ethan drink his medicine. He never complains. Not to the neighbor, not to the landlord, not even to the mirror. But tonight, Ethan's cough sounds deeper. It rattles, it scares him. At the county hospital, the tile floors glow under harsh lights. A billboard near the entrance shows a smiling man in a tailored suit. Richard, a millionaire CEO who runs a chain of tech logistics hubs across the Midwest. The ad says he believes in community. The lobby TV says he might soon become a billionaire if his company goes public. He is here tonight with a small team and a photographer, touring the pediatric wing he funded. The staff keeps glancing toward him. They adjust their badges. They speak in lower voices. Michael signs forms with a shaky pen. Money is tight, and debts from older bills hover like shadows. A clerk whispers about coverage. Michael hears the word denied. He knows that word. He has held it like a brick in his chest for months. Ethan leans into him, tired, trusting. Michael kisses his hair and says, "I'm here, buddy." Down the hall, a cart squeaks. David pushes it, sleeves rolled, mop handle balanced across his palm. He is the janitor's son, about 18, with a calm face and clear eyes that study each detail like a puzzle. He works part-time, while his father does night shifts, but tonight he volunteered to cover. He moves quietly, like someone who learned how to give space to people and how to step in when it counts. David notices the boy first. He notices the way Ethan's fingers twitch when he breathes. He notices Michael's hand, calloused, tight, white at the knuckles. He has seen this before, not exactly, but close enough to feel a pull in his chest. He parks the cart and listens as a nurse takes vitals. He hears the words, oxygen and wait. In a conference room nearby, Richard taps his watch. He has dinner reservations downtown. He is polite to the staff, practiced at charm. He loves to say, "We're a family here." But when he turns from the window and sees the ER bay lights pulse red, his mouth tightens. He doesn't like mess. He hates delays. Still, the camera crew is with him, and a live stream might cut in if something impactful happens. He steps into the hall. Michael can feel the clock. Every minute costs. Every breath costs more. He tries to be brave because Ethan watches him like he is the sky and the ground. A nurse asks for insurance. "I'm catching up," he says. "Please, he's getting worse." She looks at the screen. at the line that jumps and dips. She wants to help, but the system is the system, even on a stormy night. David clears his throat. His breathing, he says softly. He needs. The nurse raises a hand. Thank you. We have it. Richard's shoes echo on the tile. He sees the single dad. He glances at the cameras. He says, "Is everything all right?" It sounds like a line, not a question. The nurse gives him a short, "We're working." He nods and starts to step away, but Ethan coughs, a deep, tearing cough that freezes the hallway. Everyone turns. The monitor beeps accelerate. Michael's eyes find the nurse's eyes. "Please," he says. David drops the mop. He moves with quiet speed. He doesn't push the nurse aside. He doesn't speak loud. He picks up a small device from a side table, checks the settings, and, with a steady hand, tilts Ethan's head, lifts his chin, and does the one gentle reposition that an old respiratory therapist taught him months ago during a volunteer night. The monitor steadies. The air flows. The nurse blinks. Michael exhales. For a second, the world loosens its fist. Richard watches with a puzzled squint. Cameras lower, then rise again. The staff looks at each other. One word hangs in the air. How? Training? The nurse asks. Helped out in pediatrics before, David says. Lost my sister. I learned. Silence stretches, then snaps with a crack of thunder. The lights flicker. The backup hums. The moment passes, but the shape of the room has changed. Michael studies David like he is looking at a lifeline he didn't expect. The nurse calls for a doctor now, truly urgent. Papers are pushed aside. Ethan gets a bed. They wheel the boy into a bay. Michael follows, walking backward, keeping his eyes on his son. Richard stands in the doorway, jaw tight, something unnameable flickering behind his calm expression. He notices how the father's shoes leak water. He notices the boy's tiny truck clutched in his hand. He notices David's steady posture in the corner. Hands clean, eyes clear. Who are you? Richard asks. David, he says. I clean Flay. The first shock has passed, but a deeper current begins. The night is far from over, and the rain isn't letting up. The hospital feels smaller. The city outside feels larger. And somewhere between a billionaire-to-be and a single dad with a little boy, a thin bridge is forming, built from one quiet act of kindness that no one saw coming. Ethan coughs again, harder. The monitor jumps. A nurse reaches for a mask. The doctor is still not there. Richard frowns and looks down the hall, then back at the boy. Michael whispers, "Stay with me." David takes one step closer. The PA system chirps. Code, then static. Everyone looks at the ceiling. The beeping quickens. Michael's throat closes. He's fought so long, he cannot lose now. Help him, David says, voice low, steady. And then, right as the door to the bay swings inward, everyone freezes. The swing door bumps the stopper. A gust of cold air slips in from the corridor. The nurse holds a mask halfway to Ethan's face, unsure whether to wait for the doctor or act now. Michael stands at the head of the bed, one hand on his son's shoulder, the other gripping the bed rail like it's the edge of a cliff. Richard is 3 steps inside the room. He still carries the politics of power, the habit of owning every space he enters. But tonight, the space pushes back. The monitors own the air. The boy owns the time. The storm owns the mood. David scans the tray and grabs the portable suction, calm and clean, like someone who rehearsed for a moment nobody promised would come. He says, "May I?" He doesn't speak louder than the rain. He speaks to the nurse, not to the cameras and not to Richard. The nurse hesitates, then nods. Her shoulders drop into the wisdom of the emergency. Rank can wait. Do it, she says. Michael watches, jaw clenched. David works with the respect of a guest and the skill of a friend who refuses to be helpless. He angles Ethan slightly, keeps his airway open, manages the buildup, and times each move with the boy's breath. The monitor begins to climb from red to orange. A resident rushes in, panting, hair damp from the sprint across the lot. He blinks at David. Who? Then he sees Ethan, sees the monitor, and takes over with a series of practice steps. He looks at David again, this time with a nod that is not a thank you, but something heavier. You gave me a fighting chance. Richard steps back toward the doorway. The camera crew stays outside. Someone finally had the decency to lower the lens. He checks his phone, then slips it into his pocket without reading anything. The sound in the room has changed, from panic to possibility. He doesn't like panic. He's curious about possibility. Sir, the resident says to Michael, what meds does your son take at home? Michael rattles off names from memory. We ration, he admits. I'm not proud. I'm trying. No judgment, the resident says. He writes quickly and orders labs. Richard leans toward the nurse. Make sure billing doesn't slow care, he says, in a tone that tries to be generous and ends up sounding like command. She looks at him for a beat and answers carefully. Care is never slow because of billing. Both know it isn't always true. Both pretend. Michael hears it. His cheeks flush. Outside the room, the world is money. Inside, it is heartbeats and breaths. David returns to his cart, wipes his hands, and keeps close without crowding. He learned the long game of help. Stand where you can see, move only when needed, leave no footprint. He also learned that sometimes people in suits think kindness can be purchased like a service. He doesn't hate that. He only knows the price is different. The resident's orders move through the unit like freight. Labs drawn, X-ray called, respiratory paged. Ethan's chest rises with the mask in place, controlled, steadying. Michael's shoulders loosen. He leans to his son. Good job, buddy, he whispers. You're brave. The staff disperses to tasks. Richard remains. He feels the strange pull of a room where his title doesn't matter. He also feels something else. A vibration he buried years back when he decided feelings are sandbags and winning is oxygen. He studies Michael and sees a man who will fall apart only when it is safe. He tries to remember if he ever looked like that. He can't. He steps into the hall with David beside him. What you did, Richard says. How did you know? My sister, David says simply. We learned what we could. We were late learning. Richard nods like he understands. Though he doesn't, he wants to solve this. He wants to say, I'll cover everything. He almost does. Then he stops. The words taste wrong, like he's writing a check to his own conscience. Thank you, he says instead. David nods. He returns to work. Hours pass in minutes. The storm thins to a dull roar. Ethan dozes. Labs come back. The plan forms. Continue support. Monitor closely. Admit overnight. Reassess in the morning. The nurse updates Michael. He says thank you again and again until the words blur. He is not angry at the world right now. He is grateful. He is scared. Richard's team tries to pull him back to the tour. He refuses without making a scene. He lingers. He watches. He even talks to Michael, not with the glossy tone of a press event, but with the careful shape of someone who risks being human. Hard night, Richard offers. Been a hard year, Michael answers. I can imagine, Richard says. No, Michael says, and he smiles a small, tired smile to soften it. You can't, but that's okay. Richard absorbs it. He doesn't bristle, and that surprises. David finishes his corridor, then circles back. He stands in the doorway and catches Ethan's eyes. The boy raises his toy truck an inch, David lifts a thumb. They have an agreement now, simple and unspoken. A staffer from administration appears, clutching a clipboard like a shield. "We do need to talk about coverage," she says to Michael. The nurse winces. Michael straightens. He smells the storm again, this time indoors. David steps in. "Maybe we talk later," he says, polite but solid. "It's policy," she replies. Richard looks at her. "It can be later," he says, and his tone could move a mountain. She nods and disappears. The room exhales. Michael rubs his eyes. "Thank you," he says to both men, awkward in the presence of a CEO and a janitor's son, the two ends of a line he never thought he'd stand between. David shrugs. "We're neighbors." That means something. Something hardens in Richard's face. Not anger, resolve. He says, what does he need long-term? Consistency, the nurse says from the corner. Follow-ups, medication on schedule, a home that's warm enough. Michael hears the last part and looks at the floor. Richard nods once and pockets the idea like a business plan. Near midnight, the unit grows quiet. The storm slides east. The monitors soften to a steady glow. Michael, exhausted, nods off in a chair beside the bed, his hand still on Ethan's wrist, counting a pulse without thinking. In the silence, a small alarm chirps from the hallway, probably a low battery. Nobody moves. Another chirp, sharper, a third, longer. David steps into the hall, frowning. He spots the source, follows the sound to a gray metal box near the nurse's station. He tilts his head. Something isn't right. A second alarm, closer this time, flares. The lights blink, not a flicker from the storm, but a hiccup from inside the building. The nurse lifts her head. The resident appears as if pulled by a string. Richard takes one step toward Michael's room, then another. The alarms sink. The hallway reddens. A mechanical voice announces a code that is not for a patient. The CEO panicked, someone would say later, remembering his sudden, sharp inhale. Maybe so, but he doesn't run. He watches David, who is already moving, fast and focused, toward the breaker panels at the end of the corridor. Something is failing in the hospital's backup system. Ethan's room depends on that power. Michael wakes to the sound, confused. The monitor on Ethan's bed gives a cough of static. The numbers blur, then return, then blur again. David pulls open the panel, scans rows of switches, and mutters, "No, no, no." He knows this setup. He helped maintenance once when they were short. He learned which circuit feeds the pediatric bay. He learned because some lessons are carved into you. He reaches for the switch, and right then, the hallway drops into darkness. Emergency lights chew holes into the dark. Red glows along the baseboards. A thin siren wobbles, wrong pitch, like a voice cracking under pressure. The backup generator should carry the floor, but something in the chain is stuttering. Ethan's monitor flashes, then steadies on battery. The respiratory device gives a weak buzz. Michael's blood goes cold. He leans over his son. "Stay with me," he whispers. "Stay." The nurse is already moving from room to room with a flashlight, counting beats, calling out numbers. The resident dials engineering, gets a busy tone, tries again. Richard stands at the doorway, eyes narrowed, posture forward like a sprinter waiting for a gun. He has nothing to throw at a power failure. No check, no speech, no headline. He hates that, but he stays. David works the panel with calm hands. "There," he says, finding the line labeled PEDS West Aux. He toggles, waits, toggles back. He toggles a second pair and the corridor hum changes pitch. A locked relay clicks open somewhere at the end of the hall. The nurse shouts, "Whatever you did, keep doing it." David doesn't smile. He reaches for a second panel. He tells the resident, if the auxiliary battery drops in room 7, move to manual airflow. The resident blinks. How do you? David doesn't answer. He keeps working. Michael watches the mask tremble on Ethan's face. We're okay, he says quietly to the boy. We're okay. He is lying and telling the truth at the same time. He will make it okay if he has to hold up the ceiling with his shoulders. Richard steps beside David. What do you need? Light, David says, not looking up. Richard uses his phone flashlight. He didn't expect to take orders from a janitor's son tonight. It feels strangely right. It feels like weight leaving a part of his chest he forgot was heavy. They get partial power. Not perfect, but enough to stop the slide. The nurse checks Ethan's device. The battery bars stop shrinking. She nods at David with real gratitude now. Not the polite kind that ends with a handshake and a photo. You just bought us time, she says. David's face softens in relief for one beat, then hardens again. We still have a problem, he says. If the generator doesn't catch, the batteries will go in sequence. We need a stable feed. Engineering is on the way, the resident says, like a prayer. Minutes pass louder than hours. At the end of the corridor, a second set of alarms chirps. A toddler 2 rooms over starts to cry. The nurse settles them, a steady island in a sea of red emergency lights. Richard's phone buzzes with a text. Car is waiting. He silences it. He thinks of a different waiting. The long, cold kind Michael has done for months. Waiting for checks to clear, for phone calls to be returned, for doors to open. He pockets the phone. Michael notices. He says nothing, but a tiny knot of contempt he carried for rich men loosens a millimeter. The CEO is still here. The CEO is holding a light for a janitor's son. The rain stops outside. The building still sounds like weather, humming, creaking, complaining. David's fingers are blackened with dust from the panel. He leans into the box and flips a third relay that isn't labeled right. He learned to hear how electricity talks. He hears a new voice now, a grind deep in the wall, the generator trying to wake. He holds the lever in place for a long count of 10. The corridor brightens. The baseboard red melts to white. The hum steadies. The generator catches. Everyone exhales. The nurse laughs. One short, happy burst. The resident claps David's shoulder. Richard closes his eyes for a second and sees something he doesn't have a word for. Relief that isn't about money. Success that isn't about winning. Ethan's numbers stabilize. Michael sags into the chair and covers his face with both hands. Tears slip through his fingers, hot and fast. He has held so much for so long. Tonight, kindness holds him back. When he looks up, David is already wiping his hands on a rag, returning to the cart like he never left. Michael stands and stops him with a gentle grip on his forearm. You saved my boy, he says. David shakes his head. We all did. Richard watches the exchange with a new ache. Something inside him names it. Envy. Not of poverty, of connection, of meaning, of being needed for something you can't buy. Morning breaks as a pale line under the clouds. The city smells like wet concrete and coffee. The pediatric floor relaxes by degrees. A hospitalist rounds and sets a new plan for Ethan's care. He needs continuity, she tells Michael. We can enroll you in a program for meds. We'll help with a schedule. You won't do this alone. Michael nods, dizzy with hope and fear. He looks at Ethan, whose eyes are open now, soft and dark, full of trust. We're good, buddy, he whispers. We're good. David packs the cart for the last time. His shift is over. He should go home, catch 2 hours of sleep before a class at the community college. He lingers instead. He walks to the window at the end of the hall and watches the parking lot fill with mourning. He rubs a thumb across his wrist where Michael held him. He doesn't mind the mark. It makes him feel anchored. Richard approaches. No cameras, no entourage. "I run a foundation," he says awkwardly. "We help families. I can—" David lifts a palm. "Help quietly," he says. "Help in a way that leaves dignity standing up." Richard swallows and nods. He is not used to being corrected without anger. He is not used to people assuming he can be better. It moves him in a way his quarterly reports never have. He steps into Michael's room. The single dad looks up, wary. Rich men are weather systems. They roll in, make noise, roll out. "I don't want to make a show," Richard says softly. "I want to make a plan." Michael studies him, sees the absence of sales pitch, hears the presence of a real offer, the kind measured in calendar reminders and heating bills, not press releases. He nods once. Okay. They talk specifics. A social worker, a case manager, a warm apartment through winter, meds on time, follow-up rides if needed. No headlines, no checks with big numbers in black marker. Just the boring, brave work of showing up. David listens, relieved. A nurse steps in with discharge papers for tomorrow if all stays stable. She adds a warning. Don't miss the morning dose. No excuses. No excuses, Michael repeats. Ethan tugs his sleeve. Dad, he whispers. The morning shift changes. The world returns to normal speed. The floor smells like lemon cleaner and hope. Richard shakes Michael's hand. I'll see you later today, he says, and he means that too. David wheels his cart toward the elevator. He presses the button. The doors slide open. He steps in and turns. Michael raises a hand. Ethan raises the toy truck. David nods once, a promise. The doors start to close. A shout cracks the hall. Room 7, now. Michael flinches. Richard spins. The nurse bolts. The resident drops a chart and runs. Room 7 is Ethan's room. David stops the elevator with his arm and sprints back down the corridor. Shoes slapping tile. Eyes locked on the doorway where the monitor is screaming a note everyone recognizes. Everyone froze. For only a second. Then the room exploded into motion. The alarm in Ethan's room is a relentless, high, flat cry. The monitor shows numbers in red that Michael has learned to fear. The mask has slit just enough to break the seal. A small, cruel mistake made after a shift change, when hands were tired and eyes were thick with mourning. Michael lunges to the bedside. I've got you, he says, trying to reset the mask, but his fingers shake. The resident arrives, then the nurse, each moving with speed that looks like grace. Richard stands at the foot of the bed, useless and burning with it. David slices through the doorway and goes straight to the head of the bed. I'm here, he tells Ethan. The boy's eyes roll, searching for a voice he knows. David's hands steady the mask, check the line, adjust the angle, and call out, increase 2 points, now. The resident obeys without pause. The numbers climb 1 notch, then hesitate. Ethan's chest flutters. Michael feels time break into pieces, each piece sharp. He whispers, stay with me, champ, and remembers the day Ethan was born, the day the world became both heavier and lighter. He remembers his wife's laugh, now a photo in a frame that needs dusting. He remembers every bill, and every yes, and every no, and how much one small life can cost, and how cheap it would be without that life in it. The nurse calls for backup. The hallway fills with the footfalls of a rapid response team. But in the narrow gap before they arrive, the room is 4 people. A single dad, a little boy, a janitor's son, and a CEO who finally realizes money is a wall you stand behind when you're afraid to walk into the fire. Ethan, David says, voice low and steady. "Look at me." The boy's eyes flutter. For a second, he focuses. David smiles. "Good, good, little man." He checks the line again and then does something that looks like nothing. He lifts Ethan's shoulder half an inch with a rolled towel. The chest movement changes. The numbers tick upward, fragile but real. The resident exhales. The nurse nods. "Hold it," she says. The rapid teen floods in. Rehearsed, efficient. The room grows crowded. Richard backs into the doorway and becomes a wall, keeping out the curious and the cameras. He has found a job he can do. He does it with the same focus he once used to close a deal. The hospitalist arrives and takes command, aligning everyone into a single will. She sees David and tilts her head. Recognition, approval, and instruction all at once. "Stay," she says. "You've got the touch." They stabilize Ethan through a long, slow climb. The monitor's red softens to yellow, then to a stubborn green. The room breathes as one organism, shoulders lowering, jaws unclenching. Michael's forehead touches his son's hand. "Thank you," he says to the room, to the machines, to anyone listening. The hospitalist studies the chart and presses her lips together. "We need to talk," she tells Michael gently. "He's going to need a more reliable environment. Follow-ups, home support, heat, food. The basics, but on time. This isn't a one-night storm. This is winter." Michael nods. He knows. He knows too well. Richard steps forward. "Then we make it winter-proof," he says. His voice doesn't carry boardroom weight. It carries a different one. Responsibility. The hospitalist glances at him, unimpressed by titles, but open to help. "We don't do charity," she says. "We do consistency." "Then I'll help build the consistency," Richard replies. "No photo ops, just systems." David watches him say it and believes him, not because of the words, but because of the way he's standing. Shoulders down, eyes level, ego outside the room. They set a plan. The case manager is looped in. A pediatric home nurse is scheduled to visit twice a week. A trusted clinic is secured for regular check-ins. An energy assistance fund is quietly activated to keep Michael's apartment warm. A driver from the foundation will be on call for appointments. The costs are not small, but they are simple, measurable, human. Michael's throat tightens. He swallows hard. "I don't want to be a story," he says. "You're not," Richard answers. "You're a neighbor." David looks at Michael and then at Ethan. "You're a father," he adds. "That's the job." They all share a soft, tired smile, the kind born from the middle of the night when people tell the truth because they're too exhausted to do anything else. The hospitalist steps out to write orders. The nurse checks lines. The resident updates the chart. The room quiets to the loudest sound in the world. A child's breathing, steady at last. Michael leans close to Ethan's ear. He thinks of 1,000 things to say. He chooses the one that matters. "I'm not letting go." Ethan's fingers squeeze his. It is small, and it is everything. Richard watches, and something breaks inside him. In a good way, in a necessary way. A memory rises. The day he decided to outrun his own father's silence by counting numbers instead of moments. He feels the cost of that choice. He doesn't want to pay it anymore. He looks at David. "You should study medicine," he says. "You have a gift." David shakes his head. "I want to build things," he says. "Systems, safety nets. Maybe that is medicine in another way." Richard nods, humbled. "Then I'll help with that." The door clicks as someone leans in to check the monitor. A breeze sneaks through the room, cool and clean. The clock above the bed slides to late morning. The world beyond the hospital starts its day. Buses sighing, shops opening, coffee poured. Inside the room, time is slower, heavier, sweeter. The hospitalist returns with a new concern. "There's a medication shortage," she says. "The one he responds to best is on backorder, statewide." Silence. It lands like a brick in a glass bowl. Michael's face falls. Richard straightens. David frowns. The hospitalist continues. "We can manage with alternatives, but they're not as effective. We're trying to source a supply from a private distributor. It's complicated." Richard nods once, and the air around him sharpens. He knows complicated. He eats it for breakfast. But this isn't a deal to crush. This is a knot to untie. He steps into the hall and makes a call, then another, then 5 more. His voice stays low. His sentence is sh. He never says his company name. He says a child, and today, and quietly. On the 6th call, his face changes. He returns to the room. "Give me 3 hours," he says. Michael's eyes shine with fear and hope at war. He nods. David leans against the doorframe, arms folded, a sentry at the border between promise and proof. 3 hours is a lifetime when your child is sick. The minutes drag past. Every movement in the room becomes a ritual. The nurse checks the line. Michael brushes Ethan's hair. David adjusts the towel under the shoulder. Richard paces short lines outside, refusing coffee, refusing anything that smells like comfort when the boy inside hasn't won yet. The clock clicks. A courier in a gray jacket appears at the nurse's station with a small temperature-controlled case. He hands over documents. The hospitalist reads, signs, nods. She carries the case into the room. Everyone looks up. She opens it like it holds the moon. The flatline pierced the room like a dagger. The long, unbroken sound made every heartbeat stall. Michael's knees hit the floor, his face buried in trembling hands. Nurses scrambled, pressing buttons, shouting codes. David froze for a single second. His chest heaved, his hands shook, and then something inside him snapped. A memory of his little sister gasping for air years ago, when no one listened, when no doctor cared because his family was too poor. He wouldn't let history repeat. Not this time. Not with Ethan. "Move!" David shouted, his voice raw, almost breaking. "Give me space." The doctors hesitated, torn between rules and desperation. Michael looked up, eyes full of tears, and screamed, "Let him try. For God's sake, let him save my boy." Reluctantly, the lead nurse stepped aside. Everyone held their breath as David pressed his hands on Ethan's chest, whispering fiercely, "Come back, little brother. Come back." The world slowed. His palms pushed rhythmically, every movement powered by memory, love, and defiance against fate. He tilted Ethan's head, cleared the airway again, and breathed into him, fighting with every ounce of strength. Seconds dragged like hours. Michael wept, whispering prayers. The nurses stared in silence. Then, a gasp. Ethan's tiny chest rose. His eyes flickered open for the briefest moment. The flatline broke into a stuttering beep. Life crept back. Everyone froze. The nurse whispered those words without realizing. Michael collapsed forward, hugging Ethan carefully, tears soaking his son's hair. "You did it! You brought him back!" His voice broke in sobs. David sat back, shaking, tears rolling freely now. For the first time, he didn't hide his pain. He looked like a boy who had fought death and somehow won. And then, from the doorway, Richard appeared again. The billionaire CEO he had called security, yet none had come fast enough. Instead, he witnessed something his money could never buy. A janitor's son dragging a child back from the edge of death with nothing but courage and love. Richard's throat tightened. He tried to speak, but words stuck. For decades, he had measured value in numbers, contracts, empires. Yet here was a boy with nothing, achieving everything. Finally, Richard whispered, almost to himself, "Impossible." David turned, his voice hoarse but steady. "Not impossible, just love. That's all it takes." The words cut deep. Richard staggered slightly, the weight of realization crashing against years of pride. Michael rose, his arms around Ethan, and faced the CEO. His voice carried power it never had before. "You think you're strong because of your money, your empire, but tonight you saw the truth. My son's life was saved by hands that never held a dollar of yours, by kindness, by heart." Richard's eyes burned. His lips trembled, and for the first time in years, tears filled his eyes. The mask of arrogance cracked. He saw his own reflection in Michael, a father's desperation, and it shattered the fortress he had built around his soul. He stepped into the room, dropping his briefcase on the floor. His voice shook. "I lost my daughter years ago, a car accident. I thought money could fix everything, but I was too late. I buried myself in work, in power, in wealth, but I never buried the guilt." Everyone fell silent. Even the machines seemed to hush. Richard walked slowly toward Ethan's bed. He looked down at the fragile boy, then at David, then Michael. His face was wet with tears. "I see now. Money builds walls. Kindness breaks them. Tonight, I learned which one matters." Michael whispered, "Then help us, not with power, with heart." The CEO nodded, his chest heaving. He reached out, gently brushing Ethan's hand with trembling fingers. "From this day forward, I'll help you. No conditions, no pride. Just a promise. For him." David's lips trembled into the faintest smile. Michael's tears became those of relief. The atmosphere shifted, the heavy weight of despair replaced by something fragile but bright. Hope. And then Ethan's voice broke the silence, weak but clear. "Daddy, can we all be family now?" Michael sobbed openly, hugging him. David covered his face, unable to hold back his tears. Richard pressed a hand to his mouth, his body shaking with emotions he hadn't felt in decades. For a long, beautiful moment, the room became sacred. 4 broken lives connected by one child's fragile breath. But just as peace began to settle, the monitor beeped again, erratic, sharp. Doctors rushed in, panic flooding back. "His body's too weak," the nurse shouted. Michael screamed, "No, you promised." David clutched the bed, his knuckles white. Richard's face turned ghostly pale. The brief spark of redemption was tested instantly. The doctor shouted orders. Nurses moved frantically. The tension was unbearable. Michael cried out, "Please, God, don't take him. Not after this." The machines screamed louder, the lines dancing wildly. Ethan's little hand slipped from Michael's grip. His eyes fluttered. And then the screen dimmed to a terrifying flatline again. The room collapsed into chaos. Michael screamed in agony. David staggered back, shaking violently. Richard covered his face, breaking into sobs. The final words before the blackout came from Ethan's faint whisper, so fragile, no one knew if it was real or imagined. "Don't give up on me." The hospital was silent. The flatline still echoed in Michael's ears like a cruel ghost. But then, a faint, hesitant sound broke the stillness. Beep, beep, beep. The monitor came back to life. Ethan's chest rose gently, and his tiny fingers twitched. It was fragile, weak, but it was life. Everyone froze. Michael's eyes widened, tears bursting down his cheeks. "He's breathing. My boy is breathing." His voice cracked with both relief and disbelief. David collapsed to his knees, sobbing into his hands. He had carried every ounce of fear in those moments, but now, for the first time, he allowed himself to believe. Ethan had chosen to fight. Richard stood by the doorway, trembling. He pressed his palms together as if in prayer, though he hadn't prayed in decades. His billionaire's heart, so hardened by greed and guilt, softened under the sight of this miracle. For once, money meant nothing. Life, kindness, and love meant everything. Hours passed. The dawn sun crept into the hospital room, casting a warm glow on Ethan's pale face. His breathing was steady now. Michael sat at his side, stroking his hair gently. David leaned against the wall, exhausted but smiling faintly. Richard lingered quietly, watching, lost in thought. When Ethan's eyes fluttered open, Michael whispered, "You made it, buddy. You came back to me." The boy's lips curved into a faint smile. "Because you never gave up, Daddy." Michael wept, holding him close. Every tear that fell was no longer of fear, but of gratitude. David stepped closer, and Ethan reached for his hand. "You're my brother, forever." David's chest tightened, his eyes filling again. "Forever, little man. I promise." Richard looked away, unable to hide his tears. His suit, his wealth, his empire, none of it mattered in this room. He had seen something that stripped away every false layer, the power of love, the strength of kindness. Later that day, Richard gathered Michael and David in the quiet corner of the hospital garden. The spring air was crisp, birds chirped faintly, and for once, Richard's posture wasn't proud or arrogant. He looked human. "I owe you both an apology," he said softly, "for doubting you, for trying to control what I didn't understand." His voice shook. "I built my life on wealth and power because I was too afraid to face my own grief. But last night, I learned something I should have known long ago. Kindness is stronger than money. Love is richer than any empire." Michael studied him, cautious but moved. "And what will you do now?" Richard's eyes glistened. "Start over, with humility, with heart. I can never bring back my daughter, but I can honor her memory by helping others. If you'll let me, I'd like to help Ethan. Not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, but as a man who finally understands what matters." Michael's chest heaved. He glanced at David, who gave a small nod. Then Michael extended his hand. "If you truly mean that, then we accept. Not for your money, but for your heart." Richard gripped his hand tightly, tears slipping down his face. Before leaving the hospital, Ethan asked for a crayon and paper. With weak hands, he drew a picture. 3 figures standing together under a bright sun. His father, David, and himself. Above them, he scribbled one word in shaky letters. "Family." He handed it to Michael, whispering, "Keep this, so you'll never forget." Michael kissed his forehead, his tears falling onto the drawing. "I'll treasure it forever, son." The paper, fragile and childlike, carried more power than all of Richard's fortune. It was the symbol of a bond stronger than blood, forged in the fire of pain, tested in the storm of despair, and reborn through kindness. The story did not end in that hospital room. 1 year later, Ethan ran through a small backyard garden, chasing butterflies. His laughter filled the air, bright and strong. He was healthy now, his cheeks rosy, his steps full of energy. Michael watched from the porch, his heart swelling with pride. He had found steady work, enough to keep life stable. They no longer lived in fear of hospital bills. David, now studying medicine with a scholarship funded by Richard, sat nearby with books in his lap, but his eyes followed Ethan with brotherly joy. He hadn't forgotten his promise to always protect him. And Richard, the once cold billionaire, often visited, but he came not in luxury cars or polished suits. He came as a man who had rediscovered his soul. He would sit with Ethan, tell him stories, and sometimes just watch in silence, grateful for a second chance at life's meaning. As the sun set over the garden, Michael gathered everyone at the dinner table. Simple food, simple laughter, nothing extravagant. But the warmth in the air was priceless. Michael raised his glass of water and said softly, "We were broken once, each of us, but love put us back together. Wealth can build walls, but kindness builds homes. And tonight, this is home." David smiled. Ethan clapped his little hands. Richard lowered his head, tears glistening in his eyes, whispering, "Thank you for letting me be part of this." Ethan's drawing framed on the wall, 3 figures under the sun with the word family. From a single dad's tears, to a little boy's second chance, to a janitor's son who proved kindness is stronger than wealth. This was not just a story, it was an echo of hope, and may it stay in your heart forever. Thanks for watching.